Hello, I'm Steve Ratcliffe, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about 5 things that you should know when addressing your health anxiety. So what is health anxiety? Well, it's also been called hypochondriasis or hypochondria, and this term describes somebody who has lots of severe anxiety and worry about their health, and they feel that something's wrong with their health, which causes them to maybe misinterpret physical sensations in their body as being signs that something dangerous is happening or some kind of illness is occurring in the body. Now, in my experience, people with this issue can often seek help when they're feeling very anxious or tense all the time. They might be finding themselves hyper-focused on parts of their body, checking, seeking reassurance, things like Googling or going to the doctors, getting scans or tests. But then often those checks come back and there's nothing been found. And so sometimes people will come and seek therapy when they've had this happen for a period of time and nothing's been picked up, nothing's been noticed, and maybe a doctor suggested that maybe there's an anxiety element to this and there's more of a psychological element to their worries, rather than them actually having a problem with the physical health. Now, this is a very stressful problem for people who struggle with health anxiety. They can find that it can impact on their relationships, impact on work. It can impact on them financially as well, with paying for scans and tests and things like that. So it really has a real impact on their well-being and also sort of life satisfaction, quality of life. So in today's video, I wanted to cover 5 things that would be really useful to know about and help you maybe reflect on when you're engaging in talking therapies such as cognitive behavior therapy. So this is really a kind of supportive video, I guess, for you that maybe gets you to maybe thinking about talking therapies, or maybe you're already engaged in talking therapies and this might be a useful resource for you to have to just help you reflect on some of these key areas that I'm going to go through today. So 5 areas I'm going to be talking about are triggers, health assumptions and beliefs, unhelpful thoughts and misinterpretations, common behaviours to watch out for, and consequences. So triggers. And triggers could be internal triggers, which are sort of bodily sensations that we might notice. It could be new sensations that we hadn't felt before. These are what we'd call kind of internal triggers. Now, it's completely normal to feel general day-to-day physical sensations in our body. Our body is constantly moving and adjusting and changing with age. This is all normal and part of being human. But for somebody with health anxiety, this could be interpreted as being something of a warning or a danger. External triggers relate to triggers that can maybe things that you've heard from somebody else, maybe a friend sharing some news of an illness, maybe somebody passing away. There could be things that you've heard on the news about illnesses or viruses or problems that's going on. These are what we call kind of external triggers. It's really helpful for you to be aware of what your internal and external triggers are. Okay, health beliefs and assumptions. Now, this refers to certain beliefs that we have about health or about illnesses or about medical care. And these beliefs and assumptions have been formed possibly through experiences that we've had, maybe information that we've learned from other people, our perceptions of those past experiences. So it's really good to be aware of what your kind of health beliefs and assumptions are, because quite often with health anxiety, we can have a range of these beliefs that are very rigid and not very flexible, and often they can also be quite unrealistic. So for example, some common sort of health beliefs might be, I must take all symptoms and bodily sensations or bodily changes seriously. That could be a health belief. Or alternatively, could be, I must be symptom-free to be healthy. That might be a certain belief or kind of rule that we live our lives by. And some examples of health assumptions can be, that all kind of discomfort and bodily sensations are problematic. There must be a problem if we're getting these sensations. If my doctor orders a test, then there must be something seriously wrong with me. If I'm not vigilant all of the time of these possible things that could go wrong, then an underlying problem could be getting worse. So I need to be kind of on guard all the time to be aware of what's happening in my body in order to protect myself from potentially something bad that's happening at the moment. So as I mentioned, sometimes these triggers can occur and they're kind of filtered through our kind of beliefs and our assumptions about health, which then in turn cause us to have negative, unhelpful sort of thoughts or misinterpretations of these sensations that may be going through my body. And that leads to my third point here: unhelpful thoughts and misinterpretations. I mentioned in a previous video on cognitive restructuring that our mind gets it wrong sometimes, and that is part and parcel of being human. That is normal and natural. It's just the way our brain's kind of wired. It's not our fault. And because of that, we can't always trust what we think and what we feel. And so when we can sometimes fall into negative, unhelpful thinking styles or thinking habits. And with health anxiety, that's really common as well. We sometimes find ourselves catastrophizing. Those worst case scenarios will go through our mind. Or we might be jumping to conclusions that because we've seen this symptom, then that must mean this, and it must be something deadly or dangerous. We kind of jump to certain conclusions without sometimes a lot of real evidence for that. These are sort of thinking styles or thinking habits that can sometimes be formed, and they, when we engage with them, they become like sort of just really commonplace, really, and they affect our anxiety and our worries. So it's really good to be aware of what interpretations we're having of these feelings in our body, and so that we can question them. An example of this would be an example of misinterpretation could be that I get a physical sensation of a headache, and I notice I've got a headache, and my interpretation of that headache is that, well, I must have cancer, I must have brain cancer. And that's the jump, that's the link I've made from that physical sensation in my head. And if I believe that, then of course I'm going to feel anxious and I'm going to feel worried, and I'm going to want to do something about that. Next is unhelpful behaviours that can maintain my worry and my anxiety. Now, as I mentioned, sometimes the way we think about things causes us to behave in a certain way and take certain actions. Now, some of the really common behaviours that we can find in health anxiety can be focusing on our symptoms, so becoming very hypervigilant and hyper aware of the sensations in my body. So it might be that I might feel that there's something wrong with maybe my stomach, and I will become very hyper aware of that. I'll be noticing every single kind of like movement that might happen around that part of my body. I'm spending a lot of time and energy focusing my attention on that as well. And so what we can sometimes find is that can actually intensify the feelings that I'm getting. And it's also causing me to maybe notice maybe more peculiar feelings that I would not have noticed normally if I was going about my day, not really paying attention to it. Because I'm drawing my attention to it, I'm picking up on any subtle differences there, which then makes me worry more. Another really common behavior is checking and reassurance seeking. So this can often come in the form of going to the doctor whenever we notice a symptom. So we might find ourselves going to the doctor quite frequently, and just to be sure, just to make sure that I'm safe, that it's okay, that's not what I think it is, so that doctor can give us some reassurance that no, it's fine, it's okay. Okay, I can relax now until the next thing comes along, and then I'm back to the doctor to go and get it checked out. Also, another example can be Googling. We sometimes call it Dr. Google. We'll Google our ailments and our symptoms, and what we can sometimes find is that the problem with that is that because there's so many different things out there, we can find that it takes us down a bit of a tunnel towards more severe problems. Another example of reassurance seeking can be asking family members to check things. If I have a lump or a feeling in my arm, I might go and ask somebody to go and check that out for me, see if they notice anything different, maybe checking in the mirror all the time. And again, sort of like really focusing on it and checking, maybe several times a day, I might be checking this out. And another common behavior can be avoidance and safety behaviors. So avoidance can come in the form of sometimes people avoid doctors. Instead of going to the doctor all the time, sometimes we can avoid seeking health professionals because we're really anxious and worried about what they might say. So we can avoid that. Also avoiding maybe watching something on TV that might relate to kind of illnesses, maybe avoiding certain programs like Casualty, something like that involves kind of healthcare. Maybe avoiding the news, because if I hear about some form of health scare, that might make me feel more anxious and more worried that I might have something wrong with me. So I might avoid those kind of programs. And sort of safety behaviors can often be things that we might do to make us feel safe in the moment, in the short term, maybe not necessarily helpful in the long term, and they can cause sometimes negative habits. But in the short term, they might give us a sense of relief or sort of control. It's really helpful to be aware of what behaviors you might be finding yourself doing, and maybe keeping a little bit of a log of that or noticing those so that you can reflect on them and you can maybe question them. And through therapy, you can also work on some of those behaviors, because quite often we can find that those behaviors are also maintaining a bit of the worry and the problem. So by changing those, you can see some real benefits in therapy. But of course, do that with your therapist and you'll agree ways to be able to do that most effectively. And lastly, number 5 is to consider the consequences of the way of thinking, these behaviors, these triggers, how this is impacting on you. It's really important to consider what these actions that you're doing, how they're impacting on your quality of life. I mentioned that our behaviors can sometimes maintain the problem. And this is what I'm kind of sort of relating to here, is that sometimes we can have some short-term consequences that feel beneficial to us. So, by reassurance seeking or by checking, I'm getting some temporary relief or maybe a sensation of control over my symptoms. But usually that's quite short-lived. That only lasts so long, and then the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions come back, and the worry still seems to come back. So in the long term, it's having a really negative effect. As I mentioned at the start, it can affect relationships, financially. It can affect lots of different ways, my own well-being and satisfaction in life. So it's just really good to understand what consequences health anxiety is having on your life, so that it might make you feel a little bit more open and motivated and keen to try something different to address this. If you liked this video, please feel free to like it or subscribe, or maybe comment below if you found some of these things I've talked about being helpful, or if you've engaged in talking therapies and you found that helpful for your health anxiety. It'd be really nice for other people to know about it and maybe give them encouragement. I hope that's been helpful for you. I hope I've been able to give you some food for thought and give you some useful things to think about when you're engaging in CBT or other talking therapies to help you on your journey. Okay, take care. Have a lovely day.